definition from your experience of anxiety. I think that's one that's considered to be a mental health disorder. You have depression, that's considered to be a mental health disorder. Schizophrenia is considered to be a mental health disorder. And what else? That's and bipolar is considered. Can you define all of those mental health disorders so we can get an understanding of what they are and what people suffer from when they are diagnosed as such?
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. I just like to give a backdrop in association with what we're experiencing, then move into, okay, what are most people diagnosed with when you're looking from the African American perspective? When you think about what would most people be diagnosed with when you're looking from that perspective, and people who are coming from poverty or people who are living in poverty, the things that affect them, like anxiety. Anxiety really is a natural component of life. We all get excited or get scared or something to that effect. But when anxiety is when something, a diagnosed anxiety, it's based on the emotions that push you into this place, whereas it's on a continuum. It is not something that we can control, or we can kind of, navigate. So it's when the fear or worry is not temporary. It's all the time. It's consistent. That's a rudimentary understanding of what anxiety is. You're always in that state. When anxiety does not go away, that means you have a disorder. Meaning when you're always in that fearful or that worried state of mind, that's you'll always understand that I can't get it, or I'm trying to get to a place and I can't get to that place, or something is going to happen and I can't kind of stop it, or I can't navigate it. It's ongoing, and anxiety gets worse over time. So it's anxiety is the fear or worry that's more than temporary. It's something that's on a consistent basis. Now, here's the sad thing about anxiety. In the world that I came from, below poverty, the particular neighborhoods that I lived in can elicit anxiety from a person. Say, for instance, a child going to school in a gang-riddled area. There's gunfire all the time. There's a constant fear associated with being shot or killed as they walk to school every day. So that is developed within them, and all kids may not happen to all kids, but most of the African American population who live at or below poverty line experience some type of violence throughout their life as they live in those particular communities. When they're leaving home, going to school, to hear gunshots or have someone to try to approach them, all of these things, many of those young people live in fear. And that's exactly what anxiety is. It's fear or worry that's more than temporary. It lasts more than just in that moment. It persists on. So that's what anxiety is. And we have to sometimes look from a perspective where we can kind of see holistically what's bringing this on, or why is this young person like this? It could be something in a neighborhood or in their own home that could bring on that fear or that constant worry, and that could be based on trauma experiences. They could witness their mother or their father beating their mother on a consistent basis, and it's terrifying them that he's going to kill her one day. So we have to realize a lot of these things can manifest themselves based on situations and circumstances that we're in. But again, we go back to understand what is anxiety. It's fear or worry that's more than temporary. All of us have fear, all of us worry. But is it prolonged fear or is it prolonged worry? That's what separates the anxiety disorder from just simple anxiety that's natural. So we move into what is well, let's talk a little bit about some of the, the treatment of this diagnosis. If a child is diagnosed with it, what are some of the things that we can do to kind of help? Or is it medication? Is it CBT? Or is it some other tool that we can use? I mean, all of the above. I'll say all of the above. But the thing is to get to the understanding of what was the causation. Why is now, if this child is at some point in time, as they're growing, develops this anxiety disorder, that means something may have brought that particular diagnosis on. So we want to look at where they are to determine what will work best for them. Because we don't want our children to live in fear all the time. But the unfortunate reality is that many of them do. And it's not just based on this just being fearful or scary, if you will. It's based on many of the environments that we live in, which is a real and true danger that exists. So sometimes our kids find themselves in that place, man, and so we want to be able to help them. We can get cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a good tool to use, especially for anxiety. You might could get to the root of what's going on. We might could use EMDR therapy, one or two. We might have to use some medication that calms this individual, showing these individuals relaxation techniques that they might be able to relax a little more and stay calmer within the situations that they live in, because many a times they cannot change the environments that they live in, but they can kind of mitigate by changing behaviors or getting medication. Again, I'll go back. I don't like to see children on medication. I think, I'm not going to advocate for or against. My personal opinion is, because sometimes children may need some things, but there's so many misdiagnoses out there, and kids get stuck on medications and become addicted to these medications. And now there's no hope for them transitioning from, not using a medication to cope with this anxiety versus using a medication to cope with this anxiety. So I kind of like to use forms that are not any medication. So the next thing I want to discuss just a little bit is bipolar disorder. That's frequently we see people within our community. I mean, and I'm gonna speak specifically from the African American perspective, and speak specifically from communities that are at and below the poverty line. I say that because I lived in those communities. As I said earlier, I have been incarcerated, and my incarceration was based on my behaviors in the environment that I was in. Those behaviors were constant in that particular environment because it was an environment that was volatile, which elicited that behavior from me. But it can be use of drugs that can cause that. As I said earlier, I was addicted to drugs. And sometimes being addicted, you have these changes of behaviors, being in an environment and being on some type of drug or using some type of illicit drug. A bipolar disorder, it used to be called a manic depression. It's a mental health condition that causes extreme mood swings. You change, it's like Jekyll and Hyde, to be plain. It's kind of like being Jekyll and being Hyde. And it's included in emotional highs and lows, what they call mania or hypomania. It's when you're in mania, you're so energetic, you're moving, your thoughts are racing, and all of these things. You don't sleep well at night. You may develop insomnia, and you're always moving. You're full of energy, and you can get this euphoric feeling. And whereas you're you're in another world, but that's based on your chemical in your brain is changing, and you've now found yourself at this place and not even realize you're at this place. But drugs can do the same thing. So people have to be mindful when you're looking at a particular population, and that population's environment can cause things to look like other things. Like a drug addiction can look the same way as bipolar. I'm one way when I'm on coke, I'm another way when I'm not. I'm just trying to keep it real, give you some real understanding of where we are with this. If I'm on coke, I might be hyped up. I might be moving. I might be talking fast and all of these particular things. So in looking at this diagnosis, we have to determine whether it is a dual diagnosis or it is something else, meaning it's either a drug addiction or it could be bipolar. Understand what I just said based on what bipolar disorder is. It's a mental condition that causes extreme mood swings. You happy 1 minute, you could be sad the next, or you could be mad 1 minute, you could be laughing the next. You know, people who've lived in poverty or live with addicts, you can see the same types of behavior. You can see the same types of behavior. And that is coming from them utilizing that drug. Now, it still has to be prolonged, but addiction is prolonged. So to understand that, we have to understand that in looking at these particular diagnoses that we're talking about and looking at a particular group, it becomes difficult sometimes to diagnose because, like I said, sometimes it's masked, you know, because of the addiction you can't see it, or it's the illness that causes the addiction. It could be one or the other. And two, we don't like to go see doctors. And we got to change our behavior, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, if we're intended upon making our community better, if we want to make our community better, we got to put forth an effort to make it better. I mean, we have to become the watchmen of our own community. If you feel that you find yourself in this particular place where you can't, your thoughts are racing at times, you find yourself can't sleep at night, you're always moving, you're full of energy sometimes, you're euphoric hey, get yourself checked out. That's what I want. I want people to get themselves checked out. I talk about physical health as well as mental health. And in that, I tell people, hey, man, you know you better than anybody. You know something is wrong. If you don't know what is wrong, you know something is wrong. So even family members, you know, you're not a doctor or you're not a psychologist or psychiatrist. You're not diagnosing, but you want to look to see if there's anything that's unusual that's happening with my loved ones. They've changed their behaviors. They're up all night walking around and all of these particular things. They're you know, moving back and forward, talking a mile a minute. You know, all of these things. If they're out of the norm, you have to ask the question, is there something going on with my loved one? And if it is, it is your responsibility to help them. Because, you know, a sick man can't help himself. And if you don't know he's sick, you can't help him either. So we definitely want to get an understanding of these mental illnesses that plague the African American community. And I'm going to say plague the African American community. And we need to learn them, not just people who are find themselves at and below the poverty line, but individuals who consider themselves people who have made it, you know, not quite out of the struggle, but enough to be able to look back and say, I'm glad I'm not there anymore. We still have loved ones. We still have people we know who find themselves in these poverty-stricken situations, and the traumas that they face on a daily basis is enough to drive someone to having a mental disorder. So in that, understand, we are our brother's keeper. We are our brother's keeper. So again, bipolar is a mental condition that causes extreme mood swings that includes emotional highs and lows. So you change. That's significant. So understand that. So I want to talk a little bit about not just bipolar, because there is bipolar 1 and there is bipolar 2. Bipolar 2, it means you had one major depressive episode and at least one hypomanic episode, but you've never had a manic episode where you've been agitated, you are not sleeping, your sleep patterns are disrupted, you feel euphoric sometimes, or your thoughts are racing sometimes. It's not quite to that level. Hypomanic is a little less severe than being manic, but that's part of bipolar 2. That's part of bipolar 2. And then you have cleiothematic disorder. All of these fall under bipolar disorders. So you have had at least 2 years or 1 year in children or teenagers of many periods of hypomania, symptoms and periods of depressive symptoms. So you'll have in cyclothematic disorder, you'll have a presentation that looks hypomania and depressive. You have to have both of those in order to have cyclothematic disorder, which falls under the bipolar 1, bipolar 2, in that. So we want to understand there's not just the bipolar that we deal with in our community, but we deal with bipolar 2 also. It's difficult to say what is more prevalent in our community. Is it anxiety? Is it depression? Is it bipolar 1, 2, or is it cycloclimatic disorder? Is it schizophrenia? It's difficult because, again, I go back. Sometimes disorders are masked under the auspice of addiction, and sometimes we miss them because of the substance abuse associated with that. I know because I was a substance user, and some of my behaviors mimicked some of the behaviors of persons who have particular disorders. And that happens sometimes. And then sometimes substance use can bring on a disorder. So we have to do our due diligence to really see. And then it's difficult to get this accurate knowledge of what's more prevalent because we won't go to the doctor. We won't. Many times we won't even take our loved ones to get diagnosed or get medication and things like that, because one, it's we are distrust of the medical community. 2, stigmas. We don't want to have the stigmas of, hey man, they got that dude, hey that girl, to be real, that person has a disorder, that person, but they won't say that. They'll say, man, that's they crazy auntie, that's they crazy uncle. Oh man, sometimes people don't want that stigma of someone saying, okay, this person is crazy. They'll rather say, oh, he's just a drunk, oh, he's just high. Sometimes they rather say that, to keep from that stigma, where we'll accept you being high or drunk over you having a mental disorder. It's like, doesn't make sense sometimes. Some of the things that we allow, that we can prevent, it doesn't really make sense. So we want to think about those particular things. Next disorder, depression. We said we would talk about that. It's a mood disorder that causes a persistent feeling of sadness and loss of interest. Also called major depressive disorder or clinical depression. It affects how you feel, think, and behave, and can lead to a variety of emotional and physical problems. Again, we go back to, we talk about a specific group of people, African Americans. And in that, we can't leave out where the greatest majority of them reside, the environments that they are in. The greatest majority of African American population lives at or below the poverty line. And if you ever lived there, I'm an expert in that. I've lived in a poverty-stricken environment filled with criminality, drugs, guns, gangs, abuse after abuse after abuse in these areas, that in these locations that I've seen with my eyes, that I participated in. So I know what's in those particular environments, man. And it can be horrible sometimes for people. It can be horrible. And they can, and the situation itself, the lack of resources, the lack of just emotional support and things like that, takes its toll on people. Again, understand it. If you see depression, it's you have trouble doing normal day-to-day activities. If you are depressed, you don't get up like you used to. You won't get up and brush your teeth. Like, I mean, simple things. You'd rather lay in the bed. You'd rather stay in isolated, and you stop going places. You don't venture outside as much, or you have this overwhelming sadness on you all the time. You may find them crying, or the person may look sad, but that may not be an indication that they look sad. But you never know what's going on with that individual. It's really a sleight of hand type of disorder. I say that because the environment that you live in, that many individuals from our ethnic group live in those particular geographic locations and societal situations, find themselves at a disadvantage. And because of that, it may bring on this depressive state. You're about to be kicked out of your 2-bedroom apartment, and you got 5 kids. You don't know where you're going to go. You couldn't make the rent because you lost your job due to the pandemic, and now you find yourself in a situation whereas you don't know what to do. You can't get into a shelter. You haven't gotten any assistance. That might push an individual into that state of mind. And just imagine these traumas. Again, I go back to what I said in the beginning. These traumas are consistent and persistent when you're living at and below the poverty line. See, we're speaking about a specific group of people. Statistically, there are more African Americans in poverty than any other ethnic group. There are more African Americans who suffer from health disparities than any other ethnic group. So it stands to reason that we may suffer more from mental health issues than any other ethnic group. That's based on, and a lot of times it's based on our environment. It could be genetics. It could be something that has been passed along, but it could be the environment. It could be the soil of drinking water or something to that degree. But more than likely in those particular environments, because they are so volatile, and people lack so much, they bring on some of these disorders that we're discussing tonight, such as depression and anxiety. Bipolar, it is a psychological disposition, but it can be masked under the auspice that you're a drug addict. See, sometimes those particular behaviors of drug addicts mimic these disorders sometimes. So we want to definitely be mindful of that right there. If you're looking in your community and you're looking to help in your community, I think we should make ourselves aware of the things that exist in our communities. I'm not saying all of our communities are poverty stricken. They're not. But the greater majority of our communities are poverty stricken. Statistically, again, I'll go back to the fact that statistically, African Americans have the greatest number of people who live at and below the poverty line. And I know what poverty breeds because I lived there. For more than 20 years of my life, I was there until I went to prison and moved into another traumatizing environment. But it was due to the traumas that were in the environment that I grew up in that I started to take on all of these behaviors and things of that nature. And I've saw the behaviors of so many different friends and family members and neighbors. And I have determined, just looking at, I should have been a psychologist then. I could see the issues that we face in those communities. And, it's ongoing. Nothing has changed. I mean, since I was young growing up in those communities and seeing those things, nothing has really changed.
I have a question, Rodney.
Go ahead.
First, I want to say congratulations on your story. It's amazing. That's a beacon of life for anybody going through anything. And hopefully that can push some hope into a lot of the people that are viewing that may be going through something. But my question is, are you seeing more of mental health issues and challenges with the 30 and below population, or are you seeing it across the board? How do you see that when you have to deal with those issues?
Absolutely. I've seen a lot in the 30 and below category, but it's sometimes, I know I can pull some statistics to show that in the African American population, we found that the suicide rate has increased. And so what that is, may be a reflection of is the mental status of those individuals. Like a journal article I pulled, it said blacks and African Americans are less likely than whites to die from suicide at all ages. However, black and African American teenagers are more likely to attempt suicide than white teenagers. See, the misnomer is that white kids attempt more than blacks, or they kill themselves more. So what that tells me is that the impact of trauma or mental illness is very, very prevalent in teenagers in our society, in the African American community. So there's a mixture also even in that, because when you move on up to 30, we find more violent behavior of individuals who are 17 to 30. Just say 17 to 30. We do get a lot of violent behavior and illicit behavior from individuals 10 to 17, but 17 to 30, we find that those are the ones who are committing more violent acts. I mean, heinous violent acts, where you may even consider this person may have some type of mental disposition based on the atrocity and the violence that level that's committed in the act itself. So it's kind of a mixed bag. We do got a lot more who are attempting suicide, which may indicate it's a lot more mental illness in those individual teens that find themselves from 10 to 17 or from 13 to 18. All of it is in the same pot. 17 to 30, the mental illness may exist, but you may see something that is reflected differently, and it's based on the acts that they're committing, the criminality that they're committing, that they've been pushed into. And a lot of that is based on some of their illicit drug use, which could bring on a mental illness. So sometimes the numbers are not very accurate. It's really difficult to tell sometimes what is more prevalent. However, we can look and see data that shows there's an increased rate in attempts to commit suicide, which could mean, or there could be an association with a particular mental illness, but we don't know what the issues are that pushed this many teens. So we're saying that, but at the same time, we can't be definitive. And I'm speaking, when I say we can't be, I'm speaking of statistics. So I'm not really sure if we can say there is a holistic or prevalent increase from individuals who are, say, 17 to 30.
So
We just know.
I have a question. Can,
Go ahead.
okay, can you tell us what CBT is, and then uh, also go into? I think you didn't actually go all the way into schizophrenia, and then the other thing I wanted to say or comment on is how amazing it is that we are more accessible to mental health disorder, and we're such a small population as far as uh, in this country. That's kind of mind blowing.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just haven't gotten to schizophrenia, man. I'm finna get to that. But absolutely, we are a very small population, and for us to have so much mental illness in our community is really mind blowing. That should be a priority. But because status quo has not gotten all the data associated with mental illness in our community, we know it's prevalent. We know it's prevalent. We see it, but sometimes the difficulty is in us kind of navigating and securing that data. Again, we go back to our distrust of people outside of our community coming in and trying to do some type of scientific study or research. We're kind of, standoffish about that. Two, we won't go into these facilities to get checked out to see what the issue might be, if it's a mental illness or is it a physical illness. And three, back to your point, the last one you made in regards to the cognitive behavioral therapy. That's what CBT is. CBT is a talk therapy. It's something that we use consistently in this clinical world. We do individual and we do group. And it allows the individual that you're counseling or you're in therapy with to kind of open themselves up and them kind of reach a conclusion of the diagnosis of the issues that persist in their life that they might be able to navigate better. And that's the goal, is to get that individual to a place where they can navigate better. If it's dependent upon what the diagnosis is now. So if it's someone who is diagnosed with maybe just say anxiety, all anxiety disorders doesn't require medication, so they can do CBT. Depression also can do CBT. Now, schizophrenia, that may require medication, as we know what schizophrenia is. So we have to understand that particular component, that when we're doing CBT, it's not for everybody. It's a psychodynamic type of institution that we use to help guide individuals. But again, I'll say it's not for everybody. It could be a medication. You may have to use a medication. You can't use a talk therapy type of situation for these individuals. So we kind of look at it from a perspective, whereas we have to determine how severe this illness is. If it's anxiety, how severe is it? Depression, how severe is it? That'll give us the insight to say, okay, I think this person needs medication as well as talk therapy, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. That's what it boils down to, being a talk type of therapy. So did I answer everything?
Yes, sir. For the most part, we're about to go into question and answer now.
Let me go into the schizophrenia first, though. That was my last one. Okay. So schizophrenia is a serious mental disorder, which some people kind of it distorts reality for them. Schizophrenia may result in some combination of hallucinations and delusions, extremely disordered thinking and behavior that impairs daily function and can be disabling. I mean, schizophrenia is a serious disorder, and that could be, you know, if we would go through our communities, if we could go through them and really do intakes and just talk to people, man, we'll see that there is a plethora of probably of disorders in our community, in the African American community. This being one of the most severe types of mental disorders. These symptoms may involve a range of problems with your cognitions, with your thinking, your behavior, your emotions. You may have all of these delusions, like I said earlier, and hallucinations, and you have disorganized speech, and all of these particular issues, which will be concerning to any individual who comes upon this particular illness. If you're living in the house with someone like that, unmedicated, it could be detrimental. It could be very dangerous for both parties, the person who has this particular illness and the people who are living with them. This type of illness has to be managed consistently with medication. Individuals cannot, it become, all it's going to do is get worse, and somebody may be injured, hurt, or killed in these particular situations. That's how deadly it can get. So we want to be mindful of those types of things, those types of illnesses in our community, as well as even in our own families. So I wanted to really just kind of highlight that, because we kind of miss that sometimes when we're looking in our community and we talk about things, because we see particular diagnoses that are seemingly more prevalent, or they're at the top of your head, especially like anxiety and depression. I can always correlate that, or look in the environment and see that these things are going to affect more, maybe more of the population than not, depression and anxiety. But I can't be definitive and say which one affects people the most based on the environment. Now, schizophrenia, it is prevalent. Your behaviors are so prevalent, it's easily to point out and to figure out that, hey, this is a serious psychological disposition that this individual has, and they need to see a psychiatrist in regards to this, that they might be able to be prescribed some medication. It's all right if we have to. If the situations calls for an individual to be medicated to stabilize them, hey man, that's what needs to happen. Mama and daddy can't handle this no more. Being a little transparent, I had a client one time who had schizophrenia. He did all right for a while. He was on this medication, but he moved in with his brother. And when he moved in with his brother didn't like him taking the medicine, because he would tell him how the medicine would make him feel and all that. However, the medicine kept him stabilized. And so he allowed him to stop taking the medicine, man. And this individual destroyed a lot of property, and all kinds of stuff took place, because these people, I know we love our loved ones, we love them, and we don't want to put them in a hospital, or put them in a mental institution or anything like that. But it becomes difficult to manage them, and I definitely want to make sure our listening audience understand that it becomes difficult to manage them if they're off their medication, if they have not taken medication. If you allow them, it's hard to manage these individuals. So please be mindful of that. It is a serious disorder that causes a lot of issues.
Okay, so we're gonna go into. Thank you so much, sir, sharing. We're gonna go into our question and answer piece. Um, and the panelists are gonna ask questions that I guess they jotted down throughout the duration of your of you explaining everything to us. So Do we have any questions, panelists? Chance, can you hear me?
We can't hear you, Chancey.
Hey, Corey, you got a question?
So is it more of people being misdiagnosed, or is it the fact that people are just scared of facing that stigma of I'm going to go to the doctor, or they don't want to be looked at a certain way? Is it just a shameful type of thing on why you see most people waiting so late before something bad happens before they come in to see you guys?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. A lot of times it is that stigma. They don't, well, it's a stigma of them being associated with a person who the community calls or may diagnose as crazy. And that's a bad word to use. It's horrible, but we use that all the time in our community. Secondly, it's where we find ourselves at a place where you can't really tell because there's so much illicit drug use in our community. It could be a mental illness under that, but all we see is the substance issue. I was the director of a therapeutic community, which is a community with individuals who came from an incarcerated environment. They came to our center, and many of them suffered from substance abuse. It is a disease, and they suffered from that, as well as having a mental illness. So what had to be determined once they became clean and sober, was it the mental illness that caused the substance use, or was it the substance use that caused the mental illness? So sometimes you can't really tell when you look at our community. Again, we go back to statistical data says that we have the largest population of individuals who are at or below the poverty line. In those environments, we know there is a lot of illicit drug use just to alleviate the stresses of the day sometimes. And so when people are in this place where they're using drugs consistently, they're drinking consistently, they're going to mimic behaviors of people with mental illnesses. So sometimes we can't really tell is it the substance or is it truly the mental illness. That's being real with you. Some folks might not say, well, it's because all of them have mental illnesses, or some of them they really do. Yeah, some of them really do, but it's difficult to tell and be precise when it comes to particular mental illnesses in our community, because they could be masked to such a degree that we can't hardly tell. If you're using cocaine every day, you might display behaviors like a bipolar person. If you're in a bad situation as a parent and you can't pay your rent and you can't keep your lights on, you can't feed your kids or things of that nature, you may reflect behaviors of someone who's depressed, who's fallen in a depressive state, because you are. It's not that you've been depressed a long time. There are particular outlines that say how long has this person been depressed. I'm just saying, for individuals who are outside looking in, we got to delve deeper in there and see if the diagnosis meet the criteria or the threshold that's set for these people to be determined whether they have a mental illness or whether they have a drug addiction problem.
I have another question. How much, you can have someone in their family or in their community, they're just almost diagnosed like, you just got this, you got that.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that do you see coming in? It can be a misdiagnosis on your own part.
I'm sorry, repeat that question.
Okay, so you have some people that in their family that see them and they'll label them and say, hey, you just bipolar, you just this. And some of them actually take on the whole persona of being a bipolar and they actually believe it. How much of that do you see versus actually being a real diagnosis?
Hey, you know, it's funny you say that because I have gotten individuals who thought that's what their diagnosis was. That's what they had because that's something that we kind of steer people away from self-diagnosing. The doctors do the same thing when they tell you don't self-medicate, you know. But you do find that a lot. People start to feel somebody has said it, and then they may have heard another person in their family who they say may have had it, and they come to you and say, "Well, I've been feeling like this." So what we have to do is determine, do they meet that particular requirement that's associated with what the diagnosis says the standard is for anxiety, depression, bipolar. How long has it persisted? What are the characteristics associated? What are these behaviors that you elicit? And so once we get through all of that litany of things, we can determine or pretty much tell them that, hey man, you don't have bipolar, or you don't have this diagnosis or that diagnosis. Don't listen to everybody and what they're saying, because that does happen. People start to listen to their family members and other people, and they'll sometimes start to diagnose themselves and say, hey man, I think I got this, I need to see a doctor, and find out that they don't have it. They don't have that diagnosis.
Man, oh man, oh, can y'all hear me now? Wow, Rodney, man, I can't tell you how enlightening this has been tonight, man. But boy, I tell you, I got some questions because I know the panelists, I know the folks that are listening in want to know, and the stuff that you've given us tonight is just so good. So here's one. Many of us, those watching and the panel here tonight, have come from those impoverished communities. So we know all about, the gang, the poverty, the abuse, all of that stuff. But we've moved on, went into the military, went off to college, got a nice career, married, all that good stuff, but was never diagnosed, never addressed those stuff of, we felt like when I left the hood, I left it behind me, and now I'm a different person, boom, 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 all that stuff is forgotten. Only to come back to the place where you find yourself in a marriage, you find yourself with children, and you're having all these things that you never addressed come back: depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, etc., etc. Talk to us about what can we do now at this point as adults, as parents, as fathers and mothers, to not only identify these things in our children, but address these things for ourselves so that we can be better versions of ourselves to our children, so we don't perpetuate this stuff for generations to come.
Absolutely, absolutely. First off, man, as we become professionals, and I say all you gentlemen are professionals, we become professionals. We have sometimes this train of thought that I know I don't need no psychological services. I show up on my job every week, every day of every week. I'm one of the best employees there, or I've started my own business and I'm moving forward down the line, and I really don't need. Sometimes we tell ourselves that we don't need these type of services because, like you say, hey, we transitioned out of that poverty-stricken area. We're no longer in a place where we hear gunfire every day or people selling crack on the corners. Or, we moved to different neighborhoods and all of these things, man. But those many traumas that we received consistently throughout our lives before we transitioned out of poverty into what we may call a better life, they still existed. They still are there. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes if we're not careful, these things, the effects of this trauma starts to come out in our family life. We can't deal with particular circumstances and situations, or we overreact, or there's something that starts to come out which is reflective of the traumas that we experienced in our life, man. And many of us find ourselves in that situation. And I say, at least seek out someone, even if you got a spiritual advisor, if you got a minister, a pastor, something to that effect. If you don't feel like going or don't want to go to a professional psychologist or psychiatrist, I mean, speak to your pastor. Talk to them about some of the issues that are starting to show themselves prevalent within your current life that may be connected to your past life. And I think we all should take a deep breath and say, let me deal with some of this stuff from the past. Let me unpack some of this stuff, man, because now I see it affecting my forward process. It's going to affect my children. It's going to affect my relationship and all of these particular things. A lot of times, we find, especially men, difficult to get them into a counseling session. Difficult. Could be one of two things. It could be, the bravado in men. Hey, man, I don't need no counselor or none of that stuff. Or it could be just, that denial. Not saying that you're saying the same thing when you say that I'm just too manly to go, but it's saying that I know I cannot be suffering from some type of psychological disposition. I do not have an issue or a problem that I need to talk to somebody about. That's how we get sometimes, man. And what it does is it impacts our family. It impacts everything around us, man. And we definitely have to take it serious. If we do not, we'll find ourselves at a disadvantage. And what I mean is we'll cause this turmoil within the dynamics of our own family, which ends up sometimes starting to mimic the family of our origin, where we've seen drug abuse, alcohol abuse, outside, sleeping with other women, and all of these particular things start to come up. And a lot of it is based on the trauma that we experienced in our past. Like, hey, man, your father beat your mother. I seen a guy, he put his hand on his wife. Hey, man, why are you doing that? Sometimes, a woman got to stay in her place. He heard that from his daddy. Those types of things that happen. So I really encourage individuals, even though you think you have transitioned from the old life to a better life, you are now a professional, you're now doing well, and you're now mentally healthy, you could not be. There could be issues there, but only you can see. You'll be able to see that in your life. You see some of the behaviors that you elicit. You see some of the actions that you take. You hear some of the things that you say. And so you have to be, I want to say this with caution. You have to be the best judge of you. Because if it is a real mental disorder, it's difficult for you to judge you. But to speak to men who are sound mind, and think that they don't have nothing to talk about, that tells me that you might have a problem. Because all of us, if we came from those environments, all of us had experienced some type of trauma. Even if our parents were doing good, even if they had jobs and it wasn't a lot of abuse in our home or anything like that, we experienced it being in the environment. Our cousins or our aunties or uncles or the neighbors or in that neighborhood, man, you always were exposed to some type of negative behavior in our community.
So we really thank you for being on our show, and of course you're gonna become a regular on the show. We can discuss that already, because I want to kind of dive into a couple other things too, that I wanted to mention, and that was in reference to you said that sleeping with women or sleeping, being promiscuous can sometimes be an addiction. You can have an addiction to porn and other things outside of drugs to try to deal with your mental, disorders as well. But before we close, can you let the people know how they can get in contact with you or give them information in reference to if they're trying to seek our help. We have the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at the bottom of the screen, but you may have other resources that you can put out as well.
Absolutely. First, I'll give y'all my contact information. Rodney Jones at New World Believers. I'll give you my email first. NWB at megasocialenterprise.org. You can reach me via email. I'm gonna give you a phone number that you can make contact with us at 850 293-2756. That's my line, especially for individuals who may have questions or may think that some of their loved ones may be suffering from some mental illness, or is something that you would like to discuss also. So with that, there are several, the National Suicide Hotline, I mean, that is the most prevalent information that I would also give out if there's a person who find themselves at a place where they think they might, harm themselves. But outside of that, being that I am so far away, you have to seek out your local agencies and entities. First, you want to start with your local health department, where they can probably give you direction to a mental health facility. We have a place here called Lakeview. Now, Lakeview is a local organization. However, I can give you the information for that. It is not my organization, but it is a reputable, I would say, mental health institution here in Escambia County. So that's still here. So Lakeview is located here at we have Lakeview, we have Friary, but Lakeview is our most prevalent place, and that place is the number for that is 850-469-3890. It's located at 1201 West Hernandez Street in Pensacola, Florida. You can call it. It is a sliding scale type of clinic based on your financial position. I think they take Medicaid and Medicare, so you can contact them if you have an issue, if you're up in the Panhandle somewhere, or if you just want to get some more information from them. That is our premier mental health facility or mental health location here in Escambia County. A lot of people that come from lower income communities frequent this particular organization, so they have something set up for individuals who may not can pay or may have financial issues. So I would definitely reach out to them also.
Man, this is all some great information. Mr. Rodney, because of the time that we've went on tonight, we're not going to be able to broadcast this in one episode. So this is probably going to go through 2 episodes.
Okay.
So what we would like to do is once we broadcast this Tuesday, we would probably get some questions from our viewers.
Okay.
And then we can come back and get with you after that. Ask those questions to you, and maybe go through this same routine again, where you answer the viewers' questions and broadcast it for the next episode as we continue this on for the next episode. Because it's going to last 2 episodes because of the content in which we covered tonight.
There's an echo.